Fairy Tales reading
The Little Eskimo Girl and the Expedition to the Great Mountain. Where the snow crunches underfoot, the northern lights dance in the sky, and the wind sings its icy melodies, lived a little Eskimo girl named Anaruk. She had jet black hair, rosy cheeks, and bright eyes that were always searching for adventure. One winter day, her father, Ikaluk, returned home, shaking the snow from his fur coat. "Get ready. We are going on an expedition to the mountains," he announced. "Really?" Anaruk jumped up in excitement. "Where are we going?" "To the Great Mountain," said her mother, sooner, packing food supplies and warm clothes. "It will be cold but beautiful." "Will we see wild animals?" asked the girl, her eyes shining with curiosity. Her father smiled mysteriously. "Maybe yes, maybe no. The mountains are full of surprises." The sled was ready, and the sled dogs wagged their tails impatiently. "Ready?" asked her father. "Yes," shouted Anaruk and jumped onto the sled. The sled rushed through the snowy plains, and the wind raced alongside them. Halfway through their journey, they suddenly heard strange noises. Chunk! Squeak! Plop! From behind a hill, a red fox dashed out, followed by a group of small, fluffy lemmings. "What's going on?" Anaruk opened her eyes wide. The fox had a small piece of dried fish in its mouth and was running away, while the lemmings furiously chased after it. "I think that was their lunch," laughed her mother. The fox noticed the Eskimo family and quickly hid under the sled. "Should we help it?" asked Anaruk. Her father shook his head. "Foxes are clever, and lemmings are persistent. I think they'll manage." And indeed, after a moment, the lemmings stopped, looked around, and then ran off in another direction. The fox stuck out its tongue at them, flicked its fluffy tail, and disappeared into the snow. After a few hours of travel, they stopped to drink some warm tea. Anaruk looked at the snow and noticed large paw prints. "Mom, Dad, I think these are bear tracks," she said with excitement. Her father examined them carefully. "Maybe, but they look a little different than usual." The tracks were too small for an adult bear and oddly arranged, as if the animal had been hopping. Maybe it was the spirit of the mountain? Anaruk giggled. Suddenly, they heard a strange sound. "Hoo-hoo! An owl?" asked her mother. They looked up and saw a small, white bird sitting on a branch. "It's a snowy owl," her father exclaimed. The owl tilted its head, blinked its big eyes, and then flew off toward the great mountain. When they reached the base of the mountain, they heard laughter and a strange splash. Plop! Boom! Thud! Behind an icy rock, they saw a group of penguins. One of them stood on a ledge, spread its wings, and tried to jump. "Look at me! I'm a great eagle," it shouted, and plop! It landed face first in the snow. Anaruk laughed until her belly hurt. "Penguins can't fly." "But I'm trying," said the penguin, shaking off the snow. The penguins invited them to play. They slid down the ice on their bellies and skated across a frozen lake. "Let's try," said her father. They all sat on the ice and slid down with shrieks of joy. Chapter 5: A Surprise in the Ice Cave. As they climbed higher, they came across an ice cave. "Wow," or Anaruk whispered. Inside, the ice sparkled in shades of blue and purple. Long, shiny icicles hung from the ceiling, and in the middle, a small, crystal-clear stream flowed. Suddenly, something moved. "What was that?" asked her mother. From the depths of the cave, a small, fluffy bear cub peeked out. "It's a baby polar bear," said her father. The cub stretched, looked at them with big, curious eyes, and then sneezed. Achoo! Snow fell from the top of its head, and everyone burst into laughter. "Let's not disturb him. Let's move on," said her mother. They quietly backed out of the cave, leaving the bear cub in its icy kingdom. After a day full of adventures, they set up camp. The sky was full of stars, and the northern lights swirled above them. "This was the best expedition ever," said Anaruk, wrapping herself in a blanket. Her mother handed her a cup of hot cocoa, and her father told stories about the spirits of the northern lights. Suddenly, they heard soft footsteps. "Someone is here," whispered Anaruk. It was the fox. It came, curled up into a ball, and fell asleep next to the dogs. "I think we found a new friend," said her mother with a smile. Anaruk looked up at the sky and thought, "I wonder what the next adventure will be." She fell asleep, listening to the quiet whisper of the wind and the song of the northern lights. After a night spent under the stars, wrapped in warm blankets, Anaruk, her mother, and father woke up at the first light of the Arctic sun. Their sled dogs stretched lazily, and the fox, who had joined them, wagged its fluffy tail as if to say, "A time to go." "Time to go home," said her father, fastening the sled harnesses. "What a shame," sighed Anaruk, looking one last time at the great mountain. "But now we have so many stories to tell," added her mother. They carefully descended the mountain, saying goodbye to the places they had visited: the ice cave where the little bear cub lived, the spot where they met the penguins, and the icy hills where they had played. When they reached the valley, Anaruk noticed familiar tracks in the snow. "It's the fox," she shouted happily. The fox ran up to them for a moment, as if to say, "See you later." He then disappeared into the white powder. After many hours of travel, they reached their village. Their home glowed under the northern lights, and their neighbors welcomed them with curiosity. "Tell us about your expedition," Anaruk called her friend, Ukpik. Anaruk sat on a fur rug in their warm home and began her tale. "It was amazing. We met penguins that tried to fly, we found the footprints of a mountain spirit, and in an ice cave, there was a little bear cub." The children listened with wide eyes, and the adults laughed as they heard her colourful stories. "What now?" asked her mother after dinner as they sat together by the fire. Anaruk looked out the window. "I think it's time for a new adventure. Maybe this time to the frozen sea?" Her mother and father looked at each other and smiled mysteriously. "We'll see," her father said, winking. And where will Anaruk go next? That's another story. The end.
Fairy Tales reading? Subscribe to our channel to hear more.